Thank you, Jens. I hope the majority of you choose to stay, because this is going to be an extremely exciting presentation. And for those of you that are challenged by British English, then please put your headset on. When I'm on the road talking about sustainability, then often I'm asked the question, what's your sustainability strategy? What is Rockwool's sustainability strategy? My answer is very simple. We don't have a separate sustainability strategy. We have one business strategy where sustainability is an integrated part of that strategy. Because at the end of the day, sustainability is a prerequisite for commercial success, and we take it extremely seriously. And that's where we can bring in the purpose, enriching modern living, because enriching modern living, it's embedded in our organization, and it's very much part of our DNA. The SDGs, Henrik's talked quite a lot about our commitment to the SDGs. We made a commitment back in 2016 to work actively with 10 of the 17 SDGs, and we take that work very seriously. And we're not interested in a fluffy conversation about the SDGs. We want to measure our progress. And we want to measure our progress both in terms of the positive impacts of our products, but also in terms of minimizing the negative impacts of our production facilities. That was one of the reasons why we chose to work with Trucost in the course of 2018. Trucost is part of the organization Standard & Porter, who developed a methodology to measure companies' SDG impact. And out of the participating companies, Rockwool actually achieved the highest score. And in addition to that, they assessed our products as being 100% SDG positive. Also in 2018, we launched an employee campaign around the SDGs, because at the end of the day, our employees are our most important asset, and they have an incredibly important role in driving this sustainability agenda. We can talk about a number of different things when it comes to our positive impacts. Henrik's talked a little bit about our Grodan horticultural substrate, which saves an enormous amount of water. We could talk about our rock phone ceilings that provide positive, improved learning environments for many students across the world. But for the part of the presentation that will focus on the positive impacts, it was important for us to focus on climate, because climate change is the critical sustainability challenge that we're faced with currently. The IPCC, so that's the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, they carried out a number of low carbon scenarios to see how can we best achieve the Paris Agreement goals of well below 2 degrees C temperature rise. And the result of those low carbon scenarios was actually that 42% of the carbon emission reductions that we need to achieve to keep the temperature rise to well below 2 degrees C, that needs to come from energy efficiency. So energy efficiency has a critical role to play in addressing climate change. And then you can say, okay, if we look at energy efficiency, if we try to focus on energy efficiency, where should we put our money? Where should we invest? Where do we get the most carbon savings for the buck, for the dollar, for the Danish crown? And the answer is buildings. If you look at the graph on this side, you can see that buildings by far offer the most carbon savings compared to any other sector. This was a calculation again done by the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. They assumed a carbon price of $30 per ton CO2 equivalent in 2030. And as you can see, 5.7 gigatons of CO2 can be saved by existing solutions that are already existing today. 5.7 gigatons of CO2 can be achieved, saving can be achieved in the building sector. And that's almost 70% more CO2 savings than the next most cost-effective sector, which is industry. Henrik also mentioned the enormous potential there is in renovation, in retrofitting buildings. And another important point to make is that if we choose to retrofit buildings rather than building new buildings, then we can also save around 70% carbon emissions, because we're obviously saving the carbon emissions related to the building materials that we would have to make to build those new buildings. So there's enormous carbon saving potential also in retrofitting. Another way to look at the role of energy efficiency. There are many different routes to a low carbon society, and one of those routes, of course, is to green our energy supply. You can see that there are 5 bars on that diagram behind me, and the first 4 looks at different energy supplies based on different kinds of energy. So you have coal energy supply, which is emitting 960 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. And then as you move along, you can see natural gas is less carbon intensive, and then renewables far less carbon intensive. And of course, there's no surprise in that. Perhaps something that is surprising to you is that renewables are not completely carbon neutral. You require steel to make the turbines. You need to transport the materials. There are scarce materials that are used in PV panels. So renewables are important, but there is a carbon intensity. And the important message from here is that saving a kilowatt hour is less carbon intensive than generating energy, even if that energy is generated from renewables. We've heard this before. I'll say it again. We save 80 times the amount of CO2 in the lifetime of the building insulation that we sold in 2018, 80 times the CO2 that we generate, that we emit in the production of that building insulation, which is a lot. It's equivalent to 200 million tons of CO2, and 200 million tons of CO2, that's around 43,000 wind turbines. And 43,000 wind turbines, that's difficult perhaps to understand how many that is. That's equivalent to around 1,000 large wind farms. So it's a lot of wind farms. It's a lot of CO2 that we're responsible for saving. And that's building insulation. If you take our technical insulation, which is the industrial insulation used in industrial plants, in marine, then the figures get even bigger. And if you look at it from an energy perspective rather than a CO2 perspective, then the energy that our technical insulation that we sold in 2018, the energy it will save in its lifetime will be equivalent to 57% of the energy needed by the US industrial sector. So it's big numbers. That was the part of the presentation that related to our product impact. And as I mentioned before, we're measuring that performance over time to ensure that we're maximizing that positive impact as much as possible. But we also need to walk the talk. And this is the part about minimizing our negative impacts. And we take that extremely seriously as well. And that is why back in 2016, we set 6 sustainability goals with a baseline 2015. aiming for 2030. And 2030, because that's such a long way off, we decided that we will also set interim goals, and those interim goals are for 2022. And those goals cover areas such as water, CO2, energy efficiency, safety, circularity. So how are we doing? I would like to focus on two areas. The first one is CO2. So you've heard that our products save a lot of CO2, but what about the CO2 intensity of our factories? And what we have achieved so far from 2015 to 18 is we have reduced our CO2 emission in our operations by 4%. We're roughly halfway, and our goal for 2022 is 10%. We will decarbonize our operations in two main ways. The first is through an increased focus on energy efficiency, and the second is to convert our current melting technology to less carbon intensive melting technology where feasible. One example, in 2018, we made the decision to convert our coke-fired cupola in Moss in Norway to an electrical-fired power station, electrical furnace, sorry. And why did we do that? We did that because we can exploit the renewable energy that is available in Norway. We're also driving an agenda within our own offices. So we have set a target of a 75% energy efficiency improvement in the offices that we have globally. And in the course of 2018, we approved investments for deep renovation in 4 of those offices. And once those offices have been renovated or built, then we would have achieved around a third of the goal by 2022. You can see a picture of the new laboratory that we're currently building at our headquarters in Hedhusene, and this will achieve ultra energy low levels. And we'll be, of course, using our own products in that building, for example, Rock Zero. The second area that I wanted to focus on was circularity. We have an extremely strong circular business model. We have products that are extremely durable. They last for 60 years plus. The performance does not change over that time. And there's not many products in the world that you can say that about. In addition to that, our products have a large recycled content, up to 50%, and they're fully recyclable. And in relation to the last element there, the last property, recyclability, that's something that we want to exploit. And that's why we have set 2 goals that relate specifically to that. One of them relates to reducing the waste that goes to landfill from our operations. We have a goal of 85% reduction by 2030. And the second one is to increase the number of countries where we're offering reclaim waste schemes. If we look at the first one, landfill waste, then we actually went backwards in 2018. So actually we were sending more waste to landfill than in the 2015 baseline. The reason for that was that simply our stone wool was so popular, and the investments that we had made to have closed loop factories, they hadn't kicked in yet. They will kick in, and we will meet the goal in 2022 of 40% reduction of waste going to landfill. And regarding the reclaim waste schemes, we offered, as Henrik mentioned, an additional 5 schemes in the course of 2018. We're up to 10. The goal is 15 in 2022, and we're confident we will meet that goal. We also managed to get back 130,000 tons of wool from market. We're challenged in certain markets. There can be certain regulations that make it more difficult. There can be landfill prices that are extremely low. I remember when I talked to my Russian colleagues and asked them what happens to waste in Russia, where does it end up? Does it end up in landfill? They actually said, no, it just disappears. So, there's some markets that we're challenged in, but it's important for us to offer that service to say that, this is possible. We can drive this circular agenda. So there were the two examples, or two areas within walking the talk, within minimizing our negative impact that I wanted to talk about today. There's many other good stories and good examples of how we work with sustainability. It's in the report that is available today, a hard copy. It's also available online. Please read it. And if you have any questions, then please get back to us. Thank you very much.